you can drop off. All right, the recording has started. So good afternoon. Um, my name is Gilletta Patrick. I work in the Office of STEM Engagement. I'm super excited to have this opportunity to share with you. This really is what I call informational session that I usually share with my team. Kind of getting to the point that I shared maybe once or twice every once in a while. I probably should create a frequency there. If you didn't get a chance, earlier this week, I did a session on how to write a government resume. I believe they dropped going to drop the link to that in the chat. So please feel free to check that out. Today's session is called The Art of Interviewing. I should be sharing my slides. How about let's do that? Yep. And then I can make this bigger. Can you see that? Can I get a thumbs up? All right, I got a thumbs up. All right, good, good, good. If you have questions, I will monitor the chat as we're going. And yeah, we'll go from there. I guess my backstory for this one, I had a backstory last time. My backstory for this one is really just trying to be more comfortable with interviewing. Interviewing to me is that opportunity to seal the deal, you know. And so you work all this hard to get your resume through the system. It's referred, and now they're saying, hey, you know, I want to do the interview. And so how do you perfect that process? Again, it's not an intuitive process. Most of us are taught to be humble. And this is that moment of where you have to be confident as well as brag on yourself. And it's not a taboo thing because we're looking to hear what skills, what do you bring to the table? My disclaimer always is none of my information is a guarantee you're going to get a job. I'm also not a human capital specialist. As I made note earlier, I work in the Office of STEM Engagement. This is really based on personal experience. Fortunate or unfortunate, however you want to say, I've been on both sides. I've been an interviewee, being interviewed, and how do I become comfortable in that, as well as an interviewer. I sat on several panels and watched many mistakes. And so this is where this information is gleaned from. And this one is different in the fact of a lot of the content I really got from themuse.com, you know, so that's my huge disclaimer. You can feel free to go out there. It's actually a job app, you know, like Indeed, but they have a section up in the top called advice. Many amazing articles, not only on interviewing, but a lot of content that just kind of helps in that job market arena and the like, which I love. So I'm going to come out the gate with the thing that I've heard the most, and I added this slide to my slide deck. Attire matters. There really has been that question. Hey, we're living in, you know, we've lived in this COVID pandemic, and so interviews have become virtual. Hey, does it matter if I'm dressed up or not in a virtual interview? The answer is yes, absolutely. I can tell you as an interviewer, if I pull up that screen and I see somebody and they're in a t-shirt, my mind is like, you know, we still want to get dressed. We still want to be prepared. It can be from bottom up. Just do not plan to stand up, you know. Make sure your camera is on. I tell you this real quick. I was an interviewer. I was on a panel and we had several candidates. One of the candidates had a conflict with their date and noted that they could do a different date, but it would be without a camera, or they could do a later date and it would be with a camera. Of course, they were just trying to offer options. I told the panel, I said, A, we should take the later date. I know that pushes up on our timeline, but they work at a disadvantage trying to do an interview without a camera. And I would not, advocate for them to go ahead and do that. And so we did the interview with the camera, and I'm gonna leave the story there. But it proved my point that they came off very well, and they were in that top ranking of candidates. Um, the other thing is to be aware of your surroundings. Sometimes you may get on an interview and you may not be able to use your filter. So you want to make sure that your background is not the bathroom or, or the kitchen, and they're going to be walking behind you, or any of those type of things. So you really want to be aware of your background. And the main thing is, if they don't offer you a test, ask to test the system. You want to test that system before you go in, so that you make sure that everything works, your camera works, your volume works, all of that. And the light. Last thing that I'll make note of is that if you didn't know during the interview, it is absolutely okay to take notes. You can go to an interview with notes. That's absolutely okay. And it's okay to look at your notes when you're whenever you're doing your interview. If you're like me, I still live in the land of stickies, and I'll stick them right here, right above, right near the camera. So it looks like I'm looking at the camera when I'm talking, but I'm looking at my notes there. And so we're going to talk about what those notes could might contain in that aspect. And of course, the first one, which I forgot to even say, look at the camera. It's so easy to look at these pictures, and you can see my eyes right now looking at the pictures, but it is so much more personal if I look at the camera. If we have a conversation and I'm looking at the camera, you're not going to look at the camera the whole time, but it just gives more of a person to person feel if I'm looking at the camera. So, question. Do you ask to test the system for a few minutes before the interview? I would not recommend that. If Whenever you get your notification of when your interview will be, if they don't already tell you that you can test it, I would respond back with, hey, can I set up a time to test it? So in general, on my end, if I'm sending um, uh, interview dates and times out to individuals, I usually make sure that the office personnel will invite them, give them the offer of doing a test. But if you are not offered that, you should ask when you accept the date of the interview. But good question. So when we did the resume, we talked about getting in the car. And so now with the interview, it's about being the star. You want to be the star of your interview in order to get the job. It's an acronym, obviously. It is very much mirrored to your resume, but in a slightly different format, but it's very close. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. It's basically you formulating your conversation when they're asking you a question. So, you're asked, tell us about a time when you had to work in a group. You're going to formulate your responses, which to me, I could tell you this as an interviewer, I clearly hear when I know somebody knows STAR and when they don't. I absolutely hear it right off the cuff. If they start out with, I worked in a group with blah, blah, blah. I know they have no idea what STAR is, and I'm going to do my best to try to follow what they're saying so I can hear what they're doing. STAR to me is the most clear. When I hear somebody that knows STAR, it's spot on. Tell me about a time that you worked in a group, and their first statement was, when I was in the position of X, we were assigned to work in a team of 4 individuals, this thing and the like. So you start out with identifying what was your position, what position did this occur on. Then you want to talk about the tasks we were assigned, we were responsible for, we da 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 da. And at this junction, that's probably the last time that you're going to want to use we. This is that moment of action where you want to talk about what did you do on the group. I know we all want to be team players, and that's great for the presentation. That's great for the hallway conversation. But for the interview, we goes out the door, and I don't care what we did. What I care about is what you have done. I need to know what you contributed. So we were tasked with X, Y, and Z, and we were assigned this, that, and the other. At that point, what did I do? You can almost ask that question in your head. What did I do with this whole aspect? And then you can start to have that conversation of what did you do in that scenario and the like. And then the results. That's always the thing is that, hey, we're working, we're doing great work. There's a result to all of this. If it's not, I would question why we're doing it. But there's a result to all of this. Then what is that result? Why what was the benefit? What was the impact? What just what the result from all of that. So those are really huge. Now let me give you a helpful hint. I probably should have threw this on the chart somewhere. This is the moment of letting you know the information I've shared with you about the CAR and the STAR. If you from CAR was challenge, action, result, that's really for your resume. This format is absolutely aligned to how you should probably be writing your information for your performance reviews. Everybody has a job. You have an annual performance review where you have to say you've done some good work. And if you're like me, you're like blank. Oh my God, what did I do this year? I know I did something. Maybe you have a weekly activity report, and that's fantastic. But this formatting of these type of things are the perfect platform for you to write your performance reviews. Hey, what did I do? You already know your position. You can talk about what you were assigned, what you did, and the results. Man, let me tell you, you hand this to a supervisor, it's gonna be hard not to give you a good, right? A good rating. Um, so just know that this method really works through that. It supersedes just the interview phase. It really can be a great way of writing whenever you have to do any of that type of work. So here's a sample start. Tell me about a time you had to be very strategic in order to meet all of your top priorities. And then your response. In my previous, role, I was in charge of blah. And then you talk about the task. The goal was to this, that, and the other, and then you talk about your action. In order to do that, I blocked off during that time. I worked. This gave me blah, blah, blah. And as a result, it resulted in 2 weeks ahead of time, finished 10% of my sales goal. You accomplished something, you achieved something. So let's look at what are some questions that you may get during an interview. Here's a couple of things to kind of think about. Remember, I mentioned earlier about those Post-it notes, right? Or your notes in general. For me, I generally have a interview book, you know. So what is the content of those Post-its? Really, it's questions that you might get, that you go ahead and answer ahead of time so that you can have a concept of what your response might be. Um, Sometimes you might get some technical questions, but think of this in the process. Um, for the most part, the technical aspect has already really been determined by your resume. That's what got you through the system. You're technically inclined to do whatever this job said. You have this skill set. What is the purpose of the interview? The interview is to really find out if you can adjust to our culture. Are you a good fit for our team? And what are your soft skills? Are you good with your soft skills? So there may be the occasional technical question, but those in general are what the objective of the interview is. I will tell you this. I did this other class with NASA. It was an entrepreneurial class where I had to go and do all these interviews with project managers at NASA. So talking to a lot of technical folks. What I found interesting is I found more often than not the scenario of the project manager was like, hey, if I have two people and one is super technically competent but has low soft skills, but the other one is pretty good technically, but they have really high soft skills, I'm going to take the one with high soft skills. So it's really that aspect of, hey, are you able to communicate? Are you able to be a team player? And so those are where the questions are going to derive from. You may have some questions that start out with personal. Tell me about yourself. How does this position fit your goal? These are all questions. At the end of this, we'll actually drop the presentation in the chat, and you can look through these questions and work through them so you'll have these answers. But you have some leadership questions. Explain a time when you served as a leader. Other types of questions you may get are teamwork. Tell us about a group project you've worked on, your adaptability and flexibility. Tell me about a time you faced unrealistic goals or expectations. How do you respond to that? Now, let me tell you this one. Describe a time you missed a deadline. Share a time there was a mistake. But this is the key. Describe a time you missed a deadline. Please, 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 please don't tell me you never missed a deadline. Like, that's just, I've actually heard people say, I've never missed a deadline. In what lifetime? In what world? If you are delusional like that, I'm probably not going to want you on my team. Everybody makes a mistake. You miss something at some point. What I'm trying to find out is, what do you do when you mess up? When you mess up. Admission, I admit I did it, I try to correct it, that kind of thing. You're wanting to see if a person is adaptable and flexible, and that kind of runs to a question that you can almost, well, not a question, a thing that you can make note of when you hear those questions. You're hearing the question, really the thing to think about, what are they trying to gather from that question? Each question is trying to identify a skill in you, and they're listening for it. So you want to make sure you give it to them. And so always think about the question, what skill are they listening for? Time management. Tell me about a time your responsibility got a little overwhelming. What did you do? Communication. Give me an example of a time you were able to successfully persuade someone to see things your way at work. Writing sample. This is real, that you may be required to do a writing sample. Only thing I can tell you, it's going to be position dependent. Um, I've actually seen people where they give them a piece of paper and a pen and they go in a room and they have to produce a writing sample. It just really depends on the position. Um, Other areas, oops, I went backwards. Sorry. You may get some position specific questions. So it may be very technical in that regard, or anything in the unique skill depending on the type of job. One of the things that I really like as far as preparing for an interview is this interview cheat sheet. And I'm gonna have Eva drop this in the chat. This again is a document I got from you, so it's not a Gilletta created it. It's literally on the web. But I like this because it helps you really actually prepare for your interview. I know for me, it's evident when someone is not familiar with the company or not familiar with the organization. It's evident if they haven't looked up anything concerning the job or the like. But this cheat sheet will kind of help you hone in on some things to start to you know look for and the like. So definitely want to thank you, Eva. Want to share that with folks. This final question to me is my favorite. You might get asked this question, you might not, but it's basically, is there anything that you wouldn't uh in this interview that you would like to share that didn't come out previously? You may not get asked that question, but you're going to get to the end where um you have the opportunity to share. Reason why I like this question is because this is the drive it home type question. Now, here's a thing to this is my own personal philosophy when it comes to an interview. When I'm in an interview, before I walk in for that position, I have in my notes identified three main points that I want every interviewer to know and remember about me with me leaving that interview. And so when I get to this point of this question, or they ask me if I have any questions, if I haven't reiterated it enough, I am going to drive them home again. It may be I'm passionate about the position. I'm passionate about the mission or the work, and then whatever though that third thing may be. And this is that moment of where I'm going to say that or share that. But the takeaway for you is when you get ready to go into that interview, what three things do you want them to remember about you? Whatever skill that you have that you feel is very um, crucial for this position, or whatever that thing, those three things are, you want to make sure that they know those things before you leave. And to me, this is that place to do it. Again, if they don't ask you this, you could do it whenever they say, "Hey, do you have any questions?" And before you ask your question, you could just break out and say, "Hey, I just want to start out by saying I really appreciate your time and allowing me to interview. Just really wanted to reiterate that I am passionate about this position. I think the work of this is amazing and they do really great work. I truly believe in the mission of the organization, helping students, doing whatever it is they do. There's no other reward or greatness or whatever for that. And I really feel that my skill set is absolutely fitted for your position." And blah, blah, blah. So that was three things that I just wrapped up and delivered to them so that I can drive that home to make that memory for them whenever they're considering candidates. Um, Interview questions. Sometimes interview questions are long. You know, this question right here: tell us a time when you had to balance multiple priorities, multiple tight deadlines, even multiple customer expectations. What are your challenges? Let me tell you, this is a real interview question. I think I was on a panel where we used this question. I was like, oh my God, may the force be with them. Um, I wrote down here just kind of like, how do I hear it? Because you're trying to take notes and listen, what are those key words that I know I need to address? So for this one, tell me about blah, 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 multiple priorities. Okay, I need to talk about when I have multiple priorities. Tight deadlines. Okay, deadlines. Customer expectations. All right, a whole bunch of people wanted something, you know, challenges you face and the like. And let me clearly say this, it is absolutely okay to ask them to repeat the question. I remember I was in an interview one time and I was so nervous. The question was so long that I had them repeat it 3 times. But I wasn't ashamed because I wanted to make sure I answered it. And even once you've delivered your answer, you can ask them to repeat the question. There's nothing wrong with that. And so you can ask them to repeat it, to listen, to make sure that you addressed every piece of that question. Um, so that's that you want to ensure that you're doing when it comes to your interview time. And then the big key is to practice all of this. I'm talking about post-its. I'm talking about a interview journal. All of this is about practicing. How do you get comfortable delivering that content? Is practicing. When you, in general, when you step into an interview, that interview is going to be anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, not much longer than that. They're going to ask you anywhere from 5 to 8 questions, which is a lot of questions, which really means you really have anywhere from about 3 to 5 minutes per question. That's why the STAR method is so important. Helps you to not ramble, helps you not, helps you clearly and concisely share what you need to share. Um, and then you want to ensure that you don't eat up all your time and not have time at the end to ask questions. Um, Yeah, in mock interviews, I think that's always, sometimes we forget the value of that. Just having almost like a third party kind of see how you interview to be able to give you feedback. So that's definitely me personally. Sometimes, occasionally, I will research the panelists if I can actually figure out who they are. Um, I may look them up on LinkedIn or Facebook just to see who they are. Um, I will definitely research the position, research the office, the organization, the leadership. A lot of that stuff is online. If you have connections to somebody, oh, fantastic. If not, it's okay. Practice, make sure you're answering all the aspects of the question. And then for me, don't forget the value of small talk. Small talk really helps you relax as well as, make them comfortable with you. And I think to me, the easiest thing to always talk about is the weather. Never have I ever heard anybody say we're not hiring her because she talked bad about the weather. You know, she complained about the weather, no. It's just, so weather is always a great general small talk. If you can't tell, for those that know me, I've actually gone into interviews and people, we started talking about my earrings, like, oh my God, I love your earrings. Where'd you get those from? Oh, okay, I get them from, you know, whatever the conversation is, in order to, loosen and relieve some of those nerves, and the like. Um, if you're familiar with the office, then you can always, talk about office things or the like. It just depends. And then you come to the end, and like I made note, you drove home your 3 points of what you want them to remember. And so now it's time for you to ask questions. Get a question ready. Like, no questions to me says you're not prepared. We couldn't have possibly been that absolutely thorough. You really, to me, are you really interested if you have no questions? So, um, here are some examples. You know, of course, the most common one is, hey, what happens next? What's the process? Generally, it's going to be something very generic, and they're just going to be like, oh, we're doing interviews. We intend to let the person know, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But let's do some thought-provoking questions. You know, what do you see as the biggest challenge for this position, from your perspective? That's always a good question, to get an idea of, you know, how they view the position, what they think is the challenges. And it's also an opportunity that if you miss the mark, you're going to hear it, and especially if you didn't say anything about the things that they're talking about, that gives you like your last chance to kind of turn things around for yourself. If they talk about the biggest challenge is project management, and you somehow have not said anything about your project manage experience, then before you leave, you can make note of, you know, hey, I just want to make note. You said this is the thing. I want to identify that I have that skill. I've utilized it in this capacity, blah, blah, blah. And that's another reason for leaving time at the end, that you have that time and space to do that. Can you identify an early win for the position? You know, that's another kind of cool question, like, hey, what does an early success look like for this job? And then you can ask things about office culture, or what do you feel is valued as an office, and any technical questions. If there's something, widget X, blah, 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 you know, if that's applicable, then, you know, there's that aspect. Um, and then final thing, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a deal breaker, but it will make you, they'll think about you, if that makes sense. It helps you put yourself back in their mind with sending a thank you note in the end. Is it a requirement? No. You know, does it make you get the job? Not necessarily. If you don't send it, do you not get the job? No, not necessarily. But it's always a good practice. It's a courtesy practice, but it will put you back in their mind, if that makes sense. That I can tell you it does. And to me, some of the um best thank you notes are ones that um, kind of reflect back on the conversation, especially if it's something that you said was funny, or something, you know, like if they talked about, if we were all talking about my earrings, you know, hello, thanks again for your time, allowing the opportunity. I enjoyed talking about my earrings. It was so much fun. But as I mentioned previously with my work, you know, I do such and such. I would be excited and humbled to lead or participate or be a part of. Hope you could, you know, and hope that I could bring passion and vision, da 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 da. You know, just these are some of the words that you can use in a thank you card, or thank you email, thank you note, um, for your interviewers. And that I don't think I have a slide that is a slide for questions. That concludes my presentation. Ooh, there was some time there. Are there any questions?